Hello, and thank you for joining us on ILTV's Israel Weekly, the show where we discuss the latest in Israel's geopolitical developments. I'm Aaron Porras, and here with me in the studio today, with nearly 50 years combined experience in the IDF intelligence community, our former media advisor to two prime ministers, Colonel Miri Eisen and Dr. Mordechai Kedar of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at Bar-Ilan University. Now, today we will be focusing on the tragic attack at a packed mosque in the Egyptian Sinai, and Israeli NGO Breaking the Silence, which is now in a renewed fight against alleged abuses in the Israeli military. So to our first topic, first of all, I'd love to extend our deepest condolences to all the victims in Egypt. The Tel Aviv municipality lit up with the Egyptian flag recently in solidarity with the victims of one of the most devastating, horrific attacks in Egyptian soil in modern history. 305 people are dead and over 100 more are wounded in a coordinated bombing turned shooting attack at the Rawda Mosque in the northern Sinai area of Bir al-Abed. Now, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has since promised a forceful response that he's already begun to deliver on.
واستعادة الأمن والاستقرار بمنتهى القوة خلال الفترة القليلة القادمة. هذا هو ردنا. سنرد على هذا العمل بقوة غاشمة في مواجهة هؤلاء الشرذمة المتطرفين الإرهابيين التكفيريين. هذا الحادث الأليم الغادر الخسيس الجبان اللي كان بيهدف إنه يحطم معنوياتنا، بيهدف إلى تدمير صلابتنا، بيهدف إلى التشكيك في قدرتنا. هذا الحادث، هذا العمل الإرهابي الآثم يزيدنا صلابة ويزيدنا قوة ويزيدنا إرادة في إن احنا نقف ونتصدى ونكافح ونحارب الإرهاب.
בשם כל אזרחי ישראל אנחנו שולחים תנחומים לממשלת מצרים, לאזרחי מצרים, על הרצח ההמוני הנפשע של אזרחים בזמן תפילה. הטרור של האסלאם הקיצוני אינו מבחין בין דתות, בין אנשים, בין עמים, ואני חושב שהדבר המתבקש הוא שכל מדינות העולם יתאחדו להילחם בו בכל מקום, לרבות בסיני.
All right, now no one has yet claimed this attack, but it's suspected to be ISIS. From what we know today, would you agree that these are the culprits?
Well, this is all the characteristics of this action definitely goes along what we saw in Syria and in Iraq. And we do know that there is a very heavy presentation of these people in Sinai. They actually call it Wilayat Sinai, means the state of Sinai, of the Islamic state. And definitely they did it. And not only this, we know that this town, which was attacked, the Bir al-Abd, they actually refused to work with them, with the ISIS branch of Sinai.
Okay, so that kind of leads me to my next question. Do you think that this was some sort of, why was this mosque targeted specifically?
Inside Sinai, there are all sorts of elements. There are those who are more willing to work, even if just acquiescence, with the Islamic State elements that are in there, with these extreme Islamists, and those who are completely opposed. And in this case, it was really attacking the heart of those who are opposed to this Islamic presence in Sinai. It's interesting. These aren't necessarily not Egyptians. But these are Egyptians who have come into this area in Sinai basically because of the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty, because it happens to be a place inside Egypt where there's no military presence. Because of the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty that was signed almost 40 years ago, we put joint limitations on military presence. And specifically in these areas, there's a large police presence, but very little military. And for them to act militarily inside these areas, they actually need to kind of arrange it, kind of coordinate it with Israel because it's in something that's inside one of the elements of the peace treaty.
So does the cooperation with Israel complicate this issue then?
I don't think so. The fact that they fled into, I don't want to say fled, that they chose to go into this area when they wanted to get away from the presence of what was going on inside Egypt during the revolutionary time period is interesting in itself. They came into an area which specifically there is no military, but they also, from their point of view, are against Israel, so they got two things with one in that choice. For Israel, there's no question that the dilemma is always going to be if they attack us. because it's sovereign Egyptian territory. This is something the Egyptians need to take care of. For them to work there, they absolutely have to coordinate with Israel. This isn't something they can do, even if it's done quietly, under the radar. There has to be coordination.
And now, Professor Kadal, would you agree that this was a soft target to attack this area simply because of the lack of military presence, or does the fact that this was a Salafist mosque have anything to do with the choice of target?
It was a Sufi mosque.
Sufi, I'm sorry.
Sufi means those who are against the Salafis, the Salafis are against them, because they're more spiritualistic guys, while the Salafis see them as some kind of deviation of Islam. However, when you talk about Sinai, Sinai in principle is two parts. One is the plain land, which is the north part, where this town is, and the other part is the hilly, the mountain of Sinai, which is a very big area, with very high mountains and rocks and boulders and caves where these all are hiding. Israel allowed Egypt to bring in tanks and cannons, but these are useless, because in these places, the hilly part of Sinai, you need commando units brought into the place with helicopters. Otherwise, you cannot, it's very hard to move in these places. And no roads. And with no roads, no police, no nothing, no state and no law and no law, anything. So this is actually what they had to do, to pave roads into the hilly part of it, which is a very big investment in money, because you have to build bridges and tunnels and to cut some mountains in order to go and to pave roads. This is a very, very big infrastructure job, which unfortunately the Egyptians did not invest. And large parts of Sinai are actually no man's land. So these jihadists can very easily hide and once in a while come to the plainlands, as they did on Friday, and to attack and to run away back to the mountains. And this is actually what happens. And the Egyptians, instead of sending tanks and cannons, which they do, they have to bring in or to train new units of commandos, because this is the only way how to fight these jihadists. And unfortunately, Egypt has not yet done it, because this is what they should do. And for years already, Israel allows them to bring into Sinai whatever they need. But unfortunately, they don't build the right units to fight such a war against such jihadists who took a safe haven in those hills.
I think that one of the challenges that we're kind of glossing over, the Egyptian revolution has been going on for 6, closing in on 7 years. Until 7 years ago, and even in the first years of the revolution, nobody was talking about the jihadists. What they were talking about was the Muslim Brotherhood, was the rise of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood inside Egypt. I'll even go so far as to say that even both myself, I'm not sure about Professor Kedar, that I was almost surprised, because for me, the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood were extreme enough. And it was that discovery that the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, I don't consider them to be something that's exactly nice and easy, but we discovered that there are much more extreme elements than the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. So it isn't just at once. I think that Egypt itself, in its stages over what they have done with their own politics, with ousting their own Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood within their state, this has also impacted the way that they've looked at the area of Sinai. Sinai is the area which is pretty much empty. Let's put some numbers. If Egypt is around 94 million people, it is one of the 10 most populated countries on earth, or maybe in the top 15. Only 500,000 people live in Sinai. That means the 93.5 million live in the rest. So that it's the boondocks of Egypt. It's not the center of Egypt. It's not the center of focus of exactly. Which is why, for me, the fact that they have to take care of this aspect of the Islamic State, very important. But it wasn't necessarily in their own priorities at the beginning. I can understand that. At this stage, it's become into their priorities.
So going back to President Sisi's comments, he said that Egypt is fighting this alone, seemingly. But then we have Prime Minister Netanyahu, who said that all the countries of Earth need to band together, including in the Sinai. Are we going to see a stepped-up coordination between Israel and Egypt, maybe even bringing in some of the Gulf states?
First of all, I don't see any country stands in line in order to get involved in what happens in Egypt, because it's very hard.
But they're our neighbors. I mean, it's not. This isn't just any country. This
right.
Is our neighbors.
Yes, they are our neighbors, and all kinds of rumors about Israeli support to the Egyptians, which I don't know about, and if I knew, I wouldn't talk about this. But we have to remember all the time that there is, I would say, a rift between Egypt and Sinai. The rift is a social rift. Sinai is populated by Bedouins. Bedouins are the culture of what we see here in Israel, in the southern part, in Jordan, and in Saudi Arabia. And the language of the Bedouins in Sinai is a Saudi dialect of Arabic, while Egypt are peasants. And they speak Egyptian Arabic, which is totally different. And there is no social ties. And the Bedouins in Sinai, those who hosted those jihadists, actually they feel abandoned by the Egyptian state and by Egyptian society because they are not the same culture. And since they felt out of the fence of the Egyptian, so they could do whatever they like. By the way, the Bedouins actually blew up, I think, 14 times. The gas pipe, which brought gas from Egypt to Israel and Jordan, and they made good money out of it, means the Egyptians. But the Bedouins couldn't care less about the state. Let the state jump in the lake. We know we want money from the state. Okay, so they couldn't care less about the country, so they blew up this gas pipe and let the country go to hell. So this is, unfortunately, the bad feelings between the population in Sinai in general and the Egyptian state. And all the rest is the derivatives of this bad feeling between Sinai and Egypt.
I think that there are a lot of different identities going on right now inside the Middle East. And Egypt and Sinai, and the way also that Dr. Kedar was bringing up right now, is part of that. Am I Bedouin? Am I Arab? Do I speak Arabic? Am I Muslim? What type of Muslim? Am I Salafi? Am I Sufi? We're seeing it come out in Egypt, in Sinai, in a way that we didn't see in the heart of Egypt. Having said that, at the heart of Egypt during the revolution, we saw the Muslim versus Christian Copt identity issue come up with the horrific attitude of regular Muslim Sunni, both Sufis and other Egyptians, against their own Egyptian population that happened to be Christian. So these different divides come up. These divides are also backed by countries. Right now, for a change, Saudi Arabia and Egypt are best friends. That's new, that's different. I don't expect this honeymoon may go on for a while or not. But it isn't that anybody's going to step into the Egyptian marsh. I completely agree here with Professor Kedar.
You see a plateau in cooperation.
People will be willing to help, you can coordinate, but it isn't beyond that sense of really stepping in and doing something for them.
I see. All right. Well, unfortunately, we'll have to end it there and move on to our second topic. So, Breaking the Silence is a non-governmental organization that releases alleged testimonies of former IDF soldiers who claim to have performed human rights violations under orders of the military. Well, the spokesperson for the Israeli NGO, Dean Issacharoff, has just published a video he claims is evidence of army abuses that he himself committed during his time in the military. The video has, of course, now sparked renewed conflict between the organization and the government, which accuses Breaking the Silence of slander and libel. Here is Issacharoff's video.
يوم مسكونا ما قلت لك ضربونا ضربوني في رجليهم والأسلحة وأنا مربط هيك ضلوا يضربوا فيه ضلوا يضربوا بعنف وهذا وبعديها بشوي اجوا كمان جنود ضلوا يضربوني في الأسلحة وفي رجليهم ومكسرونا.
Now, Colonel Eyes, I'm going to start this topic with you this time. We just saw the tape. With your military experience, did you see any abuse in the video?
Not at all. And there's a big difference in that sense between what we see as civilians. I think we look at these and our expectations. We don't want to see the IDF in its actions as the occupying force. But we are the occupying force, and I'm saying it from the military point of view. Not only that, but in the military terminology, we are the belligerent occupiers. And rather than go, the occupation, I go, that's where we are, and until we change that status, part of the elements is that we do actions of arresting, preempting. When you arrest and preempt, I want somebody to show me the beautiful pictures of arresting, of preempting, of people who just come along because they just want to come along for the ride. There are no good pictures. In this case, we're seeing soldiers that are leading civilians. That's who they are arresting. The civilians, when I look at them, can be members of terrorist organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, they do not wear uniform. They are not carrying weapons that we can see in a clear-cut way.
But it goes back to that question where, is there a visible misconduct that can then be acted upon in legal proceedings.
Absolutely, and it's done within the IDF. The IDF is very strict within itself about its own aspects. In these films themselves, as they're shown here, leading somebody away, tying their arms behind the back, I'm like, yes? What are we talking about? Having more soldiers who are taking them on and in. The descriptions of what they say happened as opposed to what they show inside this video itself, the close-up itself showing barbed wire. Yeah, you're looking at the reality of the areas that we're in. There's barbed wire. There's people being led into arrests. But none of these are actions in which I'm calling into account Israel's moral character.
Dr. Kedar?
Look, this Breaking the Silence is, first of all, a political organization. Before it is an organization which meant to keep the rights of the Palestinians wherever they are. This is a sheer political organization which took some part of the Israeli activity, namely the activity of the IDF in the territories, as some kind of a horse to ride on against the state of Israel. And we have to name a spade a spade. In my view, if they want to run to politics, let them run to the Knesset and change the country, if not the whole world. But to take clips about daily life in Hebron or somewhere else, and to show them in a way which will blacken the face of Israel and big bad name to Israel, I think this is something which is like a treason, nothing less than a treason. That's what I feel.
For argument's sake, how do you feel a soldier in somebody's position, like a member of Breaking the Silence, who feels that there has been misconduct? How would you suggest that they go about reporting that? Who would they go to? Who do they turn to?
Complain to his superiors. Complain. There is ombudsman in the army that I was forced to do this and that. Okay, and there are all kinds of organs inside Israel with their honest approach to anyone, any soldier who feels uncomfortable in all kinds of situations, or tell your commanders that you don't fit in this place, you don't feel like doing it, and try to go to another unit, which will be much more peaceful if you don't feel, personally, if you don't feel that you want to take part in this thing. And believe me, in the army there are enough places and enough professions and enough units that you can serve very well without being involved in Hebron or somewhere else in the territory. So to come and to show a clip when a man is walking on his feet, nobody is abused, and he's being taken to interrogation, what's wrong? Where's the problem?
I want to add in this sense because, I don't always agree with Professor Kedar, and not only do I agree in this case, but to me, it's very politically based, meaning when you come with an approach that the occupation is wrong, then everything you do in it is wrong. And when you come with an approach that you can't address it inside the IDF is the Israel Defense Forces. What we do is we defend all of Israeli borders. We defend against all of the different types of threats that we have. And one of the threats that we have is the threat of terrorism, both from within the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. Specifically, what we're talking about is the additional aspect that the IDF find themselves doing, as I said, which has to do with that occupation. There's no lovely way around it. It doesn't look nice. It's not done by police forces. It's done by the IDF. And for me, I hate to put it in these terms, stiff upper lip, guys. That's where we are. You want to end the occupation? As I said, that's a political premise. No problem. I agree. Go into politics. Change the politics in Israel. But when you live here, you don't have that choice to say that the IDF is the one doing wrong. The IDF is what we have on the Lebanese border against Hezbollah, on the Golan Heights against Hezbollah, the Iranians, etc. And it's mixing these different aspects up.
Well, I think that brings up another question that I had for later, which is, let's say we found now some abuses in Issacharov's video. Is he not implicating himself and incriminating himself, or is he incriminating in any way the IDF? There's no evidence. Even if there was evidence of abuse there, how is this going to work to finger the government?
Unfortunately, that's what he wants to do, to incriminate himself in order to sacrifice himself on the altar of his goodwill to get Israel out of the territories. So he is willing and to come forward and say, hey guys, I'm the bad guy because I was a soldier and I did what I did. Come catch me and put me in jail, only because he wants to prove that Israel is a bad country. And this is actually what he wants. And this is why I feel so bad about this organization. And look, I was an officer in the army as well. I had much criticism about what I saw, but there are ways how to do it. You don't have to run to the media or to the to the other countries to show, hey, look at how bad Israel is, how bad Israel is, because this is actually politics.
I'm not only agreeing with Dr. Kedar, but I'm going to look at it again in an additional aspect. I think that one of the reasons I have such a problem is that it isn't about, I have a problem with the way that we treat or do with a Hezbollah terrorist or somebody. It's specifically about Judea and Samaria. It's specifically about the West Bank. It's specifically about an area which was in negotiations and has not yet been resolved. And in that sense, in the meantime, the IDF is the occupier. You want the IDF to be the most moral, the most straight, to do the occupation in the absolute best way, go to the IDF. I think that one of the most interesting aspects is how self-critical the IDF is of itself. Every single instance, when they don't even believe it, will be investigated. That doesn't make it any better. I don't think that we're perfect. I don't think that that some of the events that happen, that they're all not true, I'm going to say in that sense. I absolutely think that it's very challenging, but I want it to come up is inside the IDF. I want the IDF to face it and to do as it should. I want the leadership of the IDF to acknowledge it. One of the reasons that I, both as a colonel, both of us as colonels, both of intelligence, but of generals also, look at this with such a critical eye is because they're not coming to the IDF and saying, my commanders do better. They're going to the outside world. They're using it completely on a political balance. They're constantly talking about it, of the end of the occupation. But that's not the issue. There's an occupation, and in the meantime, the IDF has to be the most moral. The other aspects of the fact that it exists, hey, that's a political issue. We need to address it in a separate forum.
All right, now back to the authenticity of the organization's claims in general. The government often comes against them, saying the people who are making these claims are remaining anonymous. Therefore, how can we verify the validity of these claims? Playing devil's advocate, isn't there a good reason to stay anonymous when you're taking on the government? And vice versa, how can you accomplish anything without putting your name on something?
Well, I'm not the spokesman of this, of breaking the silence. They do have their agenda, and they do have their advisors how to address people, especially abroad, who are usually ignorant about what happens in this country. And they actually taking advantage of the fact that those listeners abroad have no idea about what happens here. So it is a captive audience which can be very easily manipulated. And this is why they go abroad, in order to shed our blood out there, our fame, and to bash us outside. But while here in the country, they are a bit more silent, because we Israelis know exactly what they do and what they are.
But that's not an issue of their anonymity in that sense, of the fact that they're being anonymous here. I'm going to be the devil's advocate in a different way, and I'm going to challenge ourselves and our viewers, okay? I go to Hebron probably once a month. I don't know how many Israelis do. I go to the heart of Hebron. I go to the places which are in the areas of conflict, which is where, by the way, Breaking the Silence does a lot of their work. And I want to tell you, it's not a nice place, Moti. It is not a nice place. It is not the place where you will feel proud.
You know,
not of your.
I have news for you.
I'm sure you go there all the time.
I sit with the Arabs in Hebron. They accept me very well.
But the point I want to make is a different one in that sense, that when you go and show the ugliest part of the conflict, the ugliest part, the most important part in that sense, I go Hebron and the Tomb of the Patriarchs. But the ugly side of the conflict, of the friction, of the occupation in those terminology is at the heart of Hebron. It looks ugly there on both sides. It isn't pretty on one side or the other. And I think in that sense, when they stay in their anonymity, to me, that's what makes it political. Because they are not willing to stand up for that. If they would stand up and put their stage there, that to me is something. And if they would do it within the military does not close down voices the way people think. I think that the top military echelons are more disturbed by the possibility that this is going on and they're not knowing about it. And they want people to come up and say if there are the different aspects.
I'd love to maybe continue that conversation another day. Unfortunately, we've run out of time today, so that's all the time we have today for this edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly. Thank you again to our guests, Dr. Kedar and Colonel Eisen. Thank you so much for coming in again. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. See you next week. Shalom from Israel.